the only information we were learning is what was leaked to journalists and came out. And some very good stuff came out. And it helped our litigation because we were able to show that in the absence of judicial supervision, bad things are happening. And in our Supreme Court papers, we cite to newspaper articles because that's, nobody could go down there. I mean, our litigation was so unusual. My clients didn't know they were the subject of litigation, right? That we couldn't communicate with them, couldn't go see them. We represented them through the fiction of their families. Their families sort of acted as their, it's called next friend, right? So it opened up the black hole, if you will, right? It was during this time that we coined the phrase, the legal black hole or prison beyond the law. But Guantanamo, as everybody knows, I think, media interest and national attention waxes and wanes. And it went through a cycle where it was up, and now it's down. And so now the media attention is trivial and insipid, mostly, with the exception of a very, very small number of journalists. The most important of whom is with the Miami Herald, which has just been wonderful, Carol Bush. And so most of the coverage doesn't really penetrate beyond the symbolic problems. And so people favor closing it because they think that's the progressive position, right? It's like, people favor any other progressive position without really, if they're a progressive. Or they favor keeping it open because they think that's the conservative position, without a lot of reflection on it. The media doesn't help penetrate that.
Thanks. What is the cost to maintain Guantanamo as opposed to what it would be to either transfer to maximum security prisons here or their own facility here?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's extremely expensive. It'd be cheaper to bring them here. It's obviously cheaper to release the guys who have been cleared for release. That's much cheaper, right? It is an extremely expensive, inefficient facility down there. And we've got space in maximum security units here. Because it's a small number of guys, you can do it much more efficiently here. Yes.
So if Congress did decide to close down, and excuse me if you already touched on this, I was taking care of the food outside.
Okay.
So, if they were to close, like, is it Delta and Iguana, the two that are still open, the two camps?
There's a couple of units that are open. Iguana's not open. That was the old juvenile camp.
Okay, so if they were to close the prison camps regardless, would you be in support of keeping Guantanamo as a naval base?
Oh, it's interesting you asked that because prior to 9/11, it was on the block to be closed. It was old and not really used anymore. Its days were numbered. It doesn't really serve much of a purpose. Its only purpose, strategically, is as a place to detain people. We detained Haitian refugees back in the 90s before 2000, before 9/11. I guess I don't really take a position. I leave that to the experts. All I know is that before 9/11, it was on the blocks to be closed.
So there's not much naval activity that actually happens there?
Not much naval activity? No.
No, it's mostly just...
No. And it doesn't have any national security, right? What are you going to do? You're going to patrol Venezuela? Right? I mean, it's, nothing. And it's huge. You got to understand, this is not a little base, right? And this area is, larger than the island of Manhattan. It's half the size of Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons why we won Rasul. It's, in all relevant ways, a small American city, right? Complete with a Starbucks.
There's like a McDonald's and stuff, right?
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
What's your opinion on the common argument that Guantanamo should be closed because it's a recruitment tool for terrorist organizations?
Right, I did address that. Yeah, I did address that.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. That's all right. I mean, just in brief, there's no question that that's true. It absolutely is. An extraordinarily potent one. But why do you believe that if it were closed, if the conditions and the nature of their detention remain the same, why do you think that that symbolic gesture of closing the base would change the recruitment quality of it, right? Yeah, you can make that argument, but you have to make that argument, you have to think that people who are opposed to Guantanamo and use it as a recruitment tool really aren't paying attention, and that they're going to be satisfied by symbolic gestures. I find that improbable. Yes. I mean, this is the same question. It generates terror. Right? There's no question it does. I mean, there's an argument to be made. The counter-argument, it seems to me, could be this. That it is so potent that sometimes, you know, so what I'll say to some people when they ask me this is, you know, it's the right thing for South Africa to close Robben Island, even if they still hold political prisoners, you know, the apartheid state still held political prisoners after Robben Island was done. That it is such a symbol that there is an independent value in not just closing it, but destroying it, right? Yeah, I get that. But given that you're not going to change fundamentally, this I think is a very potent argument, that the symbolic quality of it, right? It's the idea that what you do with the Abu Ghraib prison, which still exists as a prison, is you turn it into a shrine for the promotion of human rights, right? So you capture the prison and transform its character as a way to say, never again, which is the reason why you don't destroy something like Auschwitz, right? You use it as a symbol to say never again. I get that, I recognize that, and I think there's value in that. But if all you're doing is moving the guys here where they're going to be held in worse conditions, you know, then it's an empty symbolic gesture. And it amounts to the United States congratulating itself when it really doesn't have justification for it. And that's what happens.
You were talking about how it's more important, the more important factor is about how these people are kept rather than where they're kept, right?
Right.
But another context that we can incorporate into this argument is how these people are brought to the base, such as the case of Khalid al-Masri from Germany, who was airlifted. And there was backlash from the German government that said that there was a lack of communication between the US and Germany, and there was a lack of disclosure of event on part of the US to say that they never told the German government that they were going to airlift the German citizen Khalid al-Masri out of Germany to Cuba, to Guantanamo. So do you think it's right for the US to play God when it comes to sovereignty? And it only matters when it comes to US borders, or is the sovereignty of every nation in the world equally important?
Of course not. Of course it was wrong. Look, I have devoted my professional career. Now, when I started this litigation, I had hair. That's how long I've been doing it. Challenging various dimensions of the Bush administration and the Obama administration's detention policy. From people talk about Rasul, and that's what we were talking about Guantanamo. I also represented guys who were held in Iraq. And during the Iraq War, I was in Baghdad and in Iraq twice visiting my clients at the facility. And that case was also in the Supreme Court. And now I represent the guy who was the person they wrote the torture memo for. They wrote the torture memo in order to torture my client. And then they later used it to torture other guys. A great deal about it is both legally and morally bankrupt. But obviously, of course, those questions don't bear on what we should do now with the case, unless they do so only symbolically, right? Unless they say, it's so deeply tainted by how people got there and how they were treated beforehand and how they were treated in the early months and years of the base, that is reason enough to bulldoze it and to make it into a human rights shrine. That's a legitimate argument. But if the question for discussion here is, what should we do now? Then how people were brought there, which was reprehensible, illegal, shouldn't control the discussion.
We've got time for one more question before we move on to discussion.
I'm glad it's a woman, because there's been overwhelmingly guys. That's not good.
Do you think that a reasonable thing would be to increase the regulations of the prison maybe, and maybe make the conditions more like federal prison?
I want them less like federal prisons, right? I mean, federal prisons are bad. So there's very interesting, so all of you, if you're curious about conditions at federal prisons, should take the class next term on prisons that I'm teaching. Which is basically on the American criminal justice system. And there are things changing in the treatment of prisoners in the United States. But they're not changing because of changes in the law about what is allowed. And holding people in maximum security lockdown vastly less liberty, vastly more intrusive control over their lives is allowed in federal prisons. And in fact, it is worse than what takes place at Guantanamo. So, in truth, I'd like Guantanamo to be ignored, because the more people scrutinize it, the more it becomes a political football, and you're going to have knuckleheads in Congress saying, why do these guys, you know, get better treatment than people in a maximum security unit in a federal prison? If anything, they should get worse treatment, so let's make it worse. So, I don't want that kind of scrutiny, notwithstanding the fact that we're on video.
Excellent. So thank you for your remarks, and thank you for everybody for paying attention and asking questions. I'm very upset that I didn't get to see the majority of your talk. But right now, let's just give our guest speaker a quick round of applause. So this time, we're going to open up the discussion portion of the session. So what we're going to do, if anybody has a point that was made during the discussion or something extraneous to the discussion that they feel that Guantanamo Bay should be left open, I'll write it on this side. If you feel as if it should be closed, I'll write it on this side. And if you repeat a point, I'll just throw a check mark down beside it. So anybody who is ready to begin the discussion, let's get to it.
I think just the cost, we talked about this a little bit at the end, but it's much more expensive and efficient to continue to keep the prison open and moving them back to moving the prisoners back to the U.S. and saving money. It'll be closed.
Alright. Else we got? Kevin.
I think there is like a very, as you're saying, a very large symbolic tag to Guantanamo, because I think a lot of us didn't even know that the torture system had stopped there. It's just like so tainted in the way that people talk about it, the way people think about it, that I think that it should be closed symbolically, just to kind of say like, it's over, we're done with that.
Yeah. Some more. What else we got? Later.
I think a reason to keep it open would be the current justification that current techniques that are being held, that people use at Guantanamo are worse for case-by-case basis than solitary confinement used in federal prisons.
Okay. So it's not as bad as federal prison, so let's keep it open, right? Better than prison. What else we got? Draw.
So, just adding on to Ken's point about the symbolism of it, although he did say that, which I agree with, that if we close the prison, it wouldn't necessarily stop ISIS from using that detention as a propaganda piece. But closing the prison would also send a symbol internationally to other countries. Like, we don't tolerate human rights abuses. So closing that would show that we're trying to repent for past wrong actions, as well as it gives a domestic symbol as well, to our own people, that this is not something we accept. We're not going to tolerate any human rights abuses. So I think it has additional symbolism internationally, domestically, not just to terrorists.
Yeah, so we have some sort of self-policing mechanism that shows that we have involved. I like that. So we'll put more of some.
Yeah, I would agree with the symbolism that it gives off for human rights respecting, but conversely, I think that it can be used on the other end and say, we should keep it open because it sends a message to our all countries abroad that if we close it, we are not taking serious national security threats. We're leaving the door open to possible future attacks, and it also sends a domestic message that the government is reducing its effort to protect the American people. So I think that national security would be probably one big reason why to keep it open.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people would agree with that. It's one of the main reasons that we have kept those. We don't like terrorists, right? Bronco?
Well, I think part of the argument against better than prisons is that he did talk about how prisoners that are released back to their home countries are the exception, but I think it's an exception that can be made at least with some level of accuracy. There was a man released 2 days ago, and actually his story is being pretty widely publicized from the UK. So it also brings up the issue of national scrutiny from our Western counterparts, and whether or not we want that kind of negative attention to our legal system or outer legal system.
So you would say to close it?
Close.
What else you got here? Shreya?
I
think keeping it open, I think closing Guantanamo Bay would be infringing upon the rights of the states, because if we close Guantanamo Bay, it'll kind of be like a Yucca Mountain situation where you'd be forcing a state to either integrate these people into one of their federal prisons or to build a new prison. And I don't think there's going to be any state who would want these detainees, whether they're innocent or guilty. There's going to be a stigma against them, and the people in that state are going, and the legislators are going to reject them being put into the state. So that would be an argument for keeping it open.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, they are international criminals, so if you put them in Chicago, you put them, where do you put them? Yes?
I feel like the scrutiny, both domestically and internationally, can be a case to keep it open. Keep it open. Because though we want that kind of scrutiny on how we treat foreign nationals and U.S. citizens, even those deemed to be enemies of the state, that scrutiny is a positive thing. Because how we treat prisoners is a very important issue. And Guantanamo Bay, while it was such a terrible place and terrible events, immoral, reprehensible events going on, that scrutiny is good for us, and the process is beneficial to it.
Yes?
For an argument of keeping it open, if you were to close it without public education of the actual issues going on there and the treatment of prisoners, you kind of keep it this picture in American history of this bad thing we did, and I think that just paints the American picture in a bad light. It doesn't send a message of educating the public, it sends a message of just trying to patch up any wrongs we do without actually addressing the issues.
Yeah, so we have a whole bunch of these confidential files that we would feel perhaps guilty about in the past. And the American public would definitely want to know the secrets of Guantanamo. So, that's what we're trying.
Yeah, so just as a check mark next to national security and open side, I feel like having this place outside the United States where terrorists can be indefinitely detained is like a really strong, actually I don't know how strong, but it's a deterrent to terrorists to know that if they are captured, they'll be brought there and, you know, the treatment wasn't good in the past. I feel like it's a deterrent to the terrorists.
Yeah.
I think if you're in favor of the prisoners currently being held there having due process like other criminals, then they should be closed, because if they're moved to the U.S., then they'd be more likely to have those rights able to exercise them.
Do we want to give suspected terrorists?
Yeah, I think that's an open process. I think it's both.
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on
Why do you say that's a good
That it depends on what you think they should get, and whether they should have due process or not.
You can put under both.
And it's probably going to be decided fairly soon, whether or not they have it internationally.
What do you think?
I think they should have it internationally. I don't think the location of the prison should determine how we can treat them. I think due process and the rights guaranteed by our Constitution are things we should encourage, not just in the United States, but worldwide. How we treat people, whether they be our citizens or not, reflect that.
I agree with you. I think that if we have different standards for how we treat people in the United States than we have in other countries, and I think that kind of shows a lack of moral judgment on our part. That if we're going to enforce, you know, strict moral standards in our country, it doesn't mean that they should stop applying if we're in other places. And I feel like if we continue those practices, it sends a bad message about, you know, our moral qualities.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned that most of these people are international criminals, so you can't keep them, right? There's always a chance of human error. We're not perfect human beings. We're not omniscient. We're not all-knowing. We can make mistakes. Let's assume a person, Samir Muhammad, a very common name, that pops up in the interrogation files. And another person, Samir Muhammad, from some other part of the world, who's completely innocent, who's, let's say he's not a terrorist at all, but he gets locked up at Guantanamo. Who does the burden fall on? That this particular innocent person is being exposed and kept in such decrepit conditions. Does not the onus of that fall on the US? That this complete life is being wasted?
Yeah, I mean,
This person has never done anything wrong in his life. That see, a lot of the arguments that you put on the board are about US guilt, right? But it's not a matter of guilt. I mean, you've got someone's hands in blood that's going to That's going to spill out. There's going to be pain. What about those arguments? What about the pain that these people experience within this environment?
Yeah, what about those arguments? Let's talk about them. I mean, people are people no matter where you are, and I think we have focused on the fact that we're looking at this from an American perspective, but people can be hurt no matter where they're from. So if we are detaining somebody who's completely innocent or calling out somebody and searching them because their name happens to match that of a terrorist in Chicago O'Hare Airport, then whose fault is that?
I think going off that idea, there is a definite disparity between the way the U.S. Delivers justice inside and outside its borders, in that the U.S. has implemented like targeted killings of its citizens without trial outside its borders. So effectively putting these detainees inside the U.S., there would probably be more of a sense of transparency and accountability, and there would probably be stronger due process if it was inside the U.S.
Transparency and process. What else we got? In the back?
If there's only a sense of transparency, that's just ending at one grammar. If we aren't really giving them due process in whether they're in the United States or outside, whether we're killing them without a trial, that's just against the law. So transparency for transparency's sake can be just empty rhetoric.
Would you like to respond?
Yeah, I mean, the whole issue of like the fact that the U.S. went to another country in their airspace and killed a U.S. citizen without trial with a drone, that would not happen inside U.S. borders. And I think that's definitely something big to say about like how the status quo works in different areas of the world. And I think putting these detainees in the U.S. would probably give them better access to legal counsel, and there would be more transparency because of just the ease of access of media and like legal counsel and human rights activists to access these detainees and their conditions.
So legitimate process. The back?
Depending on the point just made about the possibility of making an error in regards to identifying someone who's a suspected terrorist, it could actually, in fact, radicalize that person who was not originally a terrorist to begin with. The murderers who went to the satirical magazine in France and killed people earlier this year, were radicalized in Abu Zubaydah prison by, I think it was a fellow inmate, but they were not originally like that before. I mean, that's something that was done to them through their trial at prison. So, I mean, this would lead to the argument of closing it because you would be putting some Americans at risk wherever they might be if they can go back home and say, this is what they did to me, and they can sort of be vulnerable to terror.
So there's a certain level of radicalization that comes with prison and people trapped.
Yes.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I think that issue also arises from like the stagnancy around Guantanamo, from the political area and the media, because as he mentioned, there were 800 people since January 2002 when it opened, and currently there's around 130. And since like the Obama administration and congressional proceedings have occurred, slowed down. So I think the people who were innocent and who were not found of certain crimes and atrocities against the United States were released. That's more of like political stagnancy now. That's like deterring that. So I think that's more of a fundamental issue of like the way we handle Guantanamo rather than Guantanamo being where it is or in the United States.
So we could perhaps restructure how we have it, but it doesn't mean that we necessarily have to close it. Sam, you have something?
I was just going to say, the reason is behind like 50% of the people being innocent or whatever but not being released. I understand there's like political stagnancy or whatever, but what exactly happened with that? Do you know what it is?
With what exactly?
Like why the people that are innocent that have been cleared haven't been released, like 50% of them or whatever?
I'm not
I just said that
Congress
Congress passed something that made it more difficult for the Secretary of Defense to clear the actual release.
Yeah, so there's a certain amount of steps. I think it was like 2009, I was reading that there was something passed by Congress where there's a certain level of scrutiny that has to go through like 10 different steps that the DOJ says that they can.
I don't know what if they want, but there's like certain criteria that they had to assure that the release met. And it's difficult to meet those.
Okay. Rocket.
I also think it's an interesting point to consider that there has been detainment of innocent individuals within the American about Japanese internment and whether or not that would have been an argument, domestic scrutiny would have been an argument to continue to intern these Japanese citizens. So at that same time, national security was also the biggest threat. They were considering that the Japan was on the other side of World War II. They were considering them as an internal threat. Would domestic scrutiny at the time to those prisoners and questions to them would have been a reason to continue to close that camp? And can we continue to use those arguments now?
It's possible. What do you guys think?
I think whenever you have like a separate prison system or your federal prison system, like whatever it be, like Guantanamo in South Africa, or I mean, on a more dramatic scale, the situation in Germany during World War II. Anytime you have like a separate prison system, it always seems to leave itself open for abuse and for scandal and for any sort of like corrupt actions to happen. It just seems like it's a bad system to have in general, and that when you have a prisoner, regardless of where he's from or what he's done, they should always be treated under the same laws that the prisoners within your naturalization are treated under.
Yeah, so constitutionally, I think that most countries on earth have like some sort of justice system that has an imprisonment system. So if you're to create something that's outside of that, you know, there's a reason for that, and it's targeting somebody. It's always like targeting somebody in particular. How much time do we have left here?
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock now, so we should probably vote. Does anybody have any like final statements that they'd like to put up on the board?
4 minutes.
That's so we're going to vote at this point, and we're going to do a secret vote. And how are we going to go through the secret vote?
Write it down on paper.
Everyone just put their heads down and can call it.
Okay, let's do that. Nobody look. Alright? I'll count. I'll look. But like, heads up, 7-up style. Put your heads down.
Please don't forget to ask who abstains.
I will. Thank you for that reminder. Okay, everyone heads down. Nobody look. Don't cheat. Alright. So if you are in favor of closing Guantanamo Bay, please place your hand in the air. Okay? And if you are in favor of keeping it open, okay? And if you choose to abstain from this vote, okay, thank you guys. So the resolution we will be passing is that the United States should close Guantanamo Bay. Thank you guys for coming out. I hope you vote numbers. You will see that the vote numbers were 18 to 12 to 2. They will be published on our resolution as well, so there's going to need to keep that secret. We'll publish the resolution and give you guys a quick update on everything that happened. Thank you guys so much for coming out, and have a great night.
We're going to be trying to do one of these every week.